uh, Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It is I, your host, Michelle, aka Chat-Mort, and thank you once again for returning to my humble little channel. I think that was my intro. I can't remember. But hi, I'm Michelle. Uh, if you haven't been here for a while, hi, I haven't either. If you've never been here before, I'm really sorry. I don't know why YouTube would do that to you, but that's just the way of the world, isn't it? So, I've not been here in a while. I've not been here in quite a while. I have coffee. I have really, really cheap coffee, and it is delicious. And I wanted to update everyone on the fact that I am, in fact, still alive and doing things and thinking things and saying things. Unfortunately, all three are still true. Whether it is to your great dismay that I'm still doing those things, or to your delight, or just you don't care. I'm doing them. I'm here. I'm alive. And it really bothered me that my most recent video that would come up on my channel was something ancient. It was like a vertical video reel type thing, or Reels or Instagram. It was a short where I was trying to talk about the Johnny Depp trial, I think. That's how long ago it was. And it just really bugged me that if somebody were to come to my channel, that would be what is representing me. An ancient, low-effort, super short video where I didn't articulate my thoughts very well, although that is, in fact, quite representative of my, just, I don't know, verboseness, verbal, intellectual impotence, etc. But I wanted to make an update. Yes. This is going quite well, isn't it? Wow. Boy, oh boy, this is great. This is good. Uh-huh. So, yeah. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm doing things. And I wanted to wish everybody well and apologize for kind of dropping off the face of the earth. I, was starting to get just nothing out of constantly fixating on politics and culture war stuff. Okay, I hadn't been getting anything out of the politics, culture war discourse on the internet for a long time, but I finally got to the point where I had to face that fact because it was just making me stressed out and aggravated all the time. And I guess I kind of wanted to talk about that in particular. Sorry you can't see the top of my head. This is really weirdly framed. I lost my little thing, my like little tripod with flexible legs that I would put my phone on to film videos up here. So you are on a book on Catholic Christianity. You are on the second book in the Darker Shade of Magic series by V.E. Schwab. You're leaning up against the first book in that series, which is a very good series. I think A Handmaid's Tale, you're leaning up against that, and some book of poetry. So the setup here is, it's precarious at best. The top of my head does exist, I assure you. It's up there. It's up there. So, yes, very good. Yeah, I just have been thinking lately about how much obsessing over that stuff was like ruining my life, essentially. And it was hard for me too to get to a point where I had to face the fact that this is just making me angry. This is making me angry and stressed out all the time, because basically vomiting my opinions on a largely unconsenting audience pertaining to politics more often than not was a huge part of my identity, really. I've always been that person who everybody rolled their eyes at in school because I just couldn't keep my mouth shut about politics. I got bullied for having the political stances that I did as a kid, and that, I probably should have, because as a child, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just regurgitating what you hear around you all the time. And that's been a little bit of it too. I don't feel like my opinions or stances have shifted all that much. It's kind of the Overton window thing. Was it Glenn Beck who actually coined that phrase? He wrote the Overton window, right? That concept was always a concept, but he crystallized it into something that we can actually talk about as a tangible concept. Sorry, I keep swallowing. I'm phlegmy today. You're welcome for that information. But, I feel like I'm here, and the acceptable frame of political views to have has been moving which ways for you? It's been moving like this way, So completely moderate people are made out to be extremists and threats to society. But at the same time, I feel like because there's been such an extreme push by progressives, these manufactured movements and sentiments that have been shoved down our throats by progressives, there is always an equal and opposite-ish reaction. So people who were kind of moderate, stinky, cowardly, scummy fence sitters, such as myself, a lot of them having this force that's pushing them so hard to the left. Is this your guys' left or your guys' right? This is the left. This way is left for the sake of this analogy. Okay. They have this force shoving them this way against their will, just pounding them into the ground about not being far enough this way without even time to contemplate those issues and decide if those are sound positions to have or not. So then they push back and they push this way, So it's not just that there are people who have been made extremists by the acceptable frame of political views, like scooting further and further toward the cliff on the left end of things, the progressive end of things, not the left end of things, But there are people who are like, no, screw you, and they have moved this way, So in a way, I feel somewhat politically homeless. And it's peculiar because I don't feel like my stances on much have changed. I've definitely become more critical of authority. I was that dumb person who was like all excited as a freaking fifth grader about, the war in Iraq and stuff. I really believed that it was about stopping terrorists. I really believed that was a noble thing that our nation was doing. I believed all of these generalizations that are just, upon any amount of honest inspection, are not logical. They're not sound stances whatsoever. They don't allow for any of the nuance that is the human element, the element of the individual. And I don't know. Some of my stances have changed for sure a little bit. I feel like I've gone more right on some things and more left on others. But for the most part, I feel like I've just kind of been a lump. I've just been a human vegetable, just sitting in place, accomplishing nothing. And there's just been this whirlwind, this hurricane of madness around me. And by just being where I am, I have been kind of abandoned by political or social groups that I always identified with because I believed the same things that they believed. And it's just weird as like, an annoying white woman to get to a point where I genuinely feel like characteristics that have nothing to do with my character or work ethic or preferences on anything, for the first time in my life over the last couple of years, I've started to feel like I'm actually being exiled from certain ideological groups, despite the fact that I share the same ideology as them, due to immutable characteristics that are irrelevant to my opinions. My opinions on economics and social issues and taxes. Taxes kind of have to do with economics. You know what I mean, though? I hope you do. I hope you know what I mean. God, I hope you know what I mean. I don't think I explained it well at all. Hi, buddy. Don't sharpen your claws. Sir, honey. Thank you. Just like lay down and be normal, please. That would be cool. He can't do that. I would like if he did, but I don't think he can. That's okay. He's a good boy anyway. But yeah, it's just been very strange to get to this place where it's like, but I agree with you on everything. I agree with you on this very thing that defines and comprises the label for this political group. But because I'm a woman, you want me gone. Or because I'm, I don't know, not gay, you want me gone. Whatever it may be, it's very peculiar to feel like, no, I genuinely embody the ideals of this group. But you guys like picked up the like pen, the like little fence that the toddlers or puppies play in, and you carried it over there and you plopped it down so I'm on the outside. Like, I didn't move. I didn't change. So as much as that was totally just nebulous, unhelpful nonsense, you're welcome for wasting 12 minutes of your life on completely non-specific drivel. It's just been weird. It's been very weird to feel alienated from like political stances, not due to discovering that there is less merit to that stance than I initially thought, but due to the people who take that stance and almost like gatekeep the ability or your right to take that stance. Again, totally non-specific and therefore wholly unhelpful for me to try to explain. He is a cute little cat. I like him a lot. But it made me feel somewhat disenfranchised, not with the opinions I have, not in a way that caused me to no longer believe in the Constitution or the right of the individual, and all that stuff, equality of opportunity, the First and Second Amendments being crucial and sacred for everyone, and an incredibly powerful tool for everyone. But yeah, it's weird to not be like wanted in certain sort of ideologies or the social spaces surrounding these ideologies, because I guess one example would be, because I'm a woman, I'm not supposed to be in some of these spaces. It's just very weird. I don't know. And I think something that has muddied the waters and complicated everything is the fact that like pickup artists have kind of labeled themselves as falling under the same category as like men's rights activists. And the fact that like pickup artist types are have appropriated and completely changed the idea of like the red pill, that's just like thrown everything into chaos in regard to the discussion of men's rights, the roles of the sexes in society and in the family. It's just like caused everything to dissolve into pandemonium, basically, which is fun at times to watch and exhausting at more times to watch. But I also just realized that I was just fixating on politics all the time, fixating on the doomsday stuff, fixating on the like WEF stuff, fixating on the chipping away, the surreptitious chipping away of all of our rights that's going on every day, coming at you from every angle every day, to where you could never possibly address them all and warn people about them who are going to be affected by this legislation or these things that are snuck in that aren't really legislation, all that stuff. All these scary things going on, like Ireland now wants to be able to, what is it? Like, jail family members of you if you have memes that they consider to be extremism or something. I totally butchered that. I will try to find the article and link it. That'll probably get this video shadow banned or whatever if I link an article from the wrong place. I don't even know the rules anymore here. But I was very torn because I got to this point where I'm like, this is destroying my mental health. I'm worried sick all the time. I'm distraught about this shit all the time. I don't think about anything anymore. I'm not enjoying all of these incredible aspects of my life, all these like very real, immediate aspects of my life that won't be here forever. Because all I do is think about this all the time. I'm worried sick about it. I obsess over it. I wake up in the middle of the night worried about this stuff. I wake up, there were times like around January of 2020 where I would wake up in the middle of the night and it would be like I was starting to have like a panic attack. Like the ramping up to a full-on panic attack had already begun by the time I woke up. Because in my sleep, I think I got to the part of a sleep cycle where you're the most able to think coherently. And my thoughts, even in my sleep, were going back to the stuff that was going on. And I was around people at that time. Don't get up on the table, Edgar. If the 15-pound cat gets on the card table, everything is going to fall apart. So, thank you, sir. Yeah, I was around people who were totally unhelpful in that regard. They were not really encouraging me to focus on anything else. Like I was getting criticized for being a nervous wreck all the time, but then they would constantly talk about it being the end of the world. I was constantly bombarded with talk about us being, in this point in Revelation, that we're going to go to this step soon and this step and this step. And at this point, I honestly don't know anymore. I honestly don't know if I believe that we're in the end times. I don't know what to believe anymore. We certainly could be. There are compelling arguments for it if you believe in Christian scripture, if you believe that all the stuff in Revelation is literal. But one of the most healing things that I've ever done in my life was befriend a bunch of normies or get adopted by an extrovert who is a normie who inducted me into their friend group of normies. And all of these people, like they're all on the internet, of course. They all are arguing on different subreddits about different things, but they're not like terminally online doom scrolling like next generation of political commentary type of internet dwellers. They're focused on other things. And these people have very full lives, like outside of sitting behind a screen and just reading and reading and reading all day and then arguing with people about it. And it's just fascinating to actually be around people who are worried about day-to-day life and aren't just obsessed with this political stuff. And on one hand, I almost feel like I'm the only one who sees that our demise is imminent and everything's going to fall apart. And on the other hand, I'm observing these people and seeing that they're actually living life. They're experiencing heartbreak and promotions and moving and weddings and all different things, starting a diet, quitting vaping, like having fights with their families. Like I'm watching these people and it's like they're actually living. Like, despite all of the stuff that's going on that has rendered many of us just hopeless and defeated to some degree, there are all these people out there who are actually living life. And it's just kind of surreal to see once you've been successfully addicted to the doom scrolling political discourse part of the internet for so long. It's very strange to see and kind of like wonderful and fascinating. It's almost whimsical in a way. And yeah, I got to a point where part of what I said to myself that helped me break my addiction to this stuff was telling myself, Michelle, if you're a nervous wreck all the time, if your like stomach is in knots and you're hyperventilating and you want to throw up and cry every time you open your phone because you start scrolling through people arguing about the next horrible, borderline apocalyptic thing, it's coming and it's going to be here next week and everything's going to fall apart and there's going to be an economic crash in 3 days and everybody's going to get their accounts frozen who voted the wrong way, all that stuff, and we're going to be invaded by China like tomorrow and we're all going to be their slaves or whatever. Like, I had to tell myself, Michelle, if you are a nervous wreck all the time to where you're on the cusp of like having to go into a facility where you can't have any sharp things, you can't have a phone charger, you can't have a pencil to draw because a pencil is pokey, like what good are you? What good can I do if I'm just at my wit's end because I've been successfully... That's a weird way to frame it, but you know what I mean? I've gotten so wrapped up in this stuff, I'm so obsessed with it that I'm like terrified all the time. Like my social media addiction, it's almost the like, it's like cortisol hits instead of dopamine hits almost, like that's what makes me feel alive, panicking about the next thing that I come across online. And yeah, it's like, what can I contribute? If I really believe this stuff is happening, if I really believe that more people need to know what's going on with some of these really very real pressing issues, threats to our freedoms, threats to our way of life, whatever that means, threats to individuals' rights and little groups' rights as well. I'm not making myself someone who's going to be able to actually contribute at all. If my mental health is in the toilet, how am I going to help? How am I going to be able to discuss this stuff with people if it comes up? Because there are tons of open-minded people you can talk to about politics. Tons. Remember those like actually well-adjusted normies I was talking about earlier? I just realized my pinky nails are way longer than any of my other nails, so it looks like I have like a Coke nail on either hand. Okay, that's not related whatsoever. Sorry. There are tons of people out there you can talk to about this stuff who are open-minded, who just don't know stuff. You know, you don't go in guns blazing and attack people for not knowing something or having a different opinion on something. What you do is you just share articles with people. If somebody's like, yeah, I don't believe that they're teaching kids this stuff in schools. I don't believe that this social contagion is like at epidemic level. When you come across one of those articles online, go through it, see if it's an actual credible article, and send it to them. You know, just show them like, I'm serious, this is actually happening. You know, you can actually open people's eyes up to stuff that's going on if you are in a headspace that enables you to talk to people normally. You know, if you come at things like, the world is ending, what are you talking about? You're gonna go to Italy next year. The world's gonna have burnt down by that time next year. You know, we're not gonna have rights anymore by next year. We're all gonna be in a work camp for China next year. Like, you know, if you're a nervous wreck all the time, you're not going to come across as a rational, credible source of this information, you know? And yeah, it's interesting to have taken a step back from just being completely immersed in the like doomsday political discourse all the time to see that day-to-day life is still going on, you know? There are wonderful things happening. There are terrible things happening. Obviously, that's all that's emphasized ever by anyone. But there are really wonderful things happening too. You know, in the midst of all this terror and chaos and doom and hopelessness, sunsets are still beautiful every night. Coffee is still delicious. And that first cup of coffee in the morning, like you can feel your will to live coming back, like a gas tank filling up. You know, there are amazing books to read. There are fascinating documentaries to watch. There are tons of parks you've never hiked in. I promise you. I promise you there are tons of parks in your area, unless you're like some weirdo hiking enthusiast, that you've never hiked in. There are dozens of people, probably only like a degree or two of separation away from you, who you would hit it off with and click with well enough that you feel like you've known them forever. They are out there. All these wonderful things are out there, and they're happening all around us. And I'm like staring at my phone all day, getting hunched over like a tiny little old lady with terrible posture because I'm just like staring at my phone all day, panicking about shit. I'm accomplishing nothing. That does nothing to further my political ideology, if you want to put it that way. I'm accomplishing literally nothing. I'm helping no one. I'm waking no one up to the realities, the threats to our rights and stuff and our liberty going on by being a nervous wreck all the time. You know, I'm not. And all I'm accomplishing is being an active participant in robbing myself of a life that I could be having. You know, it's like, you just have to get to a point, and I've heard so many people talk about this recently, whatever your political sort of affiliation is, you get to a point where it's like, listening to people talk about this, listening to this streamer, this podcast, this radio broadcast, whatever, is not doing anything good for me anymore. And people just shut it off. The problem is people shut it off forever because they just get to a breaking point where they're like, I can't do this anymore. I can't. I turn it on and 10 minutes later, I feel like the world is ending. And so a lot of people walk away from it altogether. They just bow out. And I think the balance, I'm saying, everything I'm saying is so blatantly obvious, and it's probably just nauseatingly condescending. Sorry. But I think what you have to do is you have to be mindful about what media you're consuming, whether it's, you know, political streamers on Twitch or Rumble broadcasts or like shit on AM radio if you're a dinosaur, you know? Whatever it is that you are consuming, you have to be mindful of what you're consuming. You have to be able to identify when like this is detracting from how good of a day I was having. This is starting to tank my mood. And you have to be able to walk away from it at that point. Just turn it off and listen to something else. It's important to kind of cultivate that control over your emotions. And that's something that everybody can benefit from and something that people work on for their whole lives, whether you do it through prayer, meditation, going to therapy, positive like self-talk, like whatever sort of esoteric nonsense or like really out there nonsense, or whether it's psychology and just basic books on like advice and how to get healthier and happier and more productive and fulfilled. It's critical that you be able to identify when focusing on these topics is no longer serving you. And I think what I've said to people when we've discussed this is that I think the best thing to do is become informed about like what issues are going to be on the ballot soon. Become informed if there's something sinister going on with the Board of Education at your school or teachers, or if there's some, I don't know, level of corruption going on in your local like police station or the courts, or I don't know what the hell. But become apprised of what's going on. And once you kind of have a feel of what's going on, what's important, then you can just kind of take a step back, you know? Like, once you know enough to feel like I would be able to chime in on this issue, or I know whether or not I want to vote for this person, or whether or not I want to support this policy, then step back. Once it starts kind of leaking over from, okay, I'm catching up on what's going on in the world, I'm catching up on the important stuff, to now they're just scaring the shit out of me, so I keep watching them or listening to them because they act as if they have the answers, and if I just keep listening to them, then everything will work out somehow. Then step away from that. And negativity will always find you. Negativity is around us constantly. The news covers things because they're shocking, because they are outliers, because they're so horrible that they think these things will get thousands of clicks and comments on them and interactions and views on TV or whatever. Like, I've always thought that this is kind of human nature. And everybody I've said this to that I can remember was like, I don't really know about that, but I'm right, okay? I know I'm right, so I'm going to tell you guys now. My coffee's cold already. That's a sad story. But I think it's part of our very nature to emphasize the negative. If you believe in evolution, or even if you don't, before we were as safe as we are, before we had all of our needs met, before we all had shelter and relatively good nutrition and heat and clean water and clothing and a grocery store we could go to and all of that shit, you know, just a couple centuries ago, just a century ago even, or two, things were a lot more dire. So even if you don't believe in evolution, I think it is built into us. We are wired to emphasize and focus on the negative more than the positive. Because if you're like living in a village somewhere, if you're like living in a hut with no electricity, no running water, you're having to hunt for your own food. If you're like in a little house on the prairie type scenario or some shit, I don't know. if you were to expend as much energy, psychological and physical, on good things that happen as you were the bad things, you would probably die. If you were distracted by good things happening, like, oh, I shot a deer, this is fantastic. If you were as consumed by that as you would be by seeing a bear approaching off in the distance, you would die. You couldn't afford for the good things to overshadow or distract from the things that were a threat to your existence. A threat to your family, a threat to your livelihood, all of that. I think evolutionarily, emphasizing and focusing on the negative is what allowed us to survive as a species to the point that we're at now. And I think choosing to focus on the positive is sort of a higher thinking, learned trait. It's something that, I don't want to say it's a luxury. That's probably not an accurate way to frame it. But I don't think it comes naturally to emphasize the good things. It doesn't. And I think that's why a lot of various ideologies and religions teach gratitude so much. Even if it's just like a spiritual, non-denominational type thing, they all emphasize gratitude. Because I don't think that that's something that comes authentically. The same way that I think empathy is taught. The same way like toddlers are like horrific psychopaths until they know better. I think seeking out the good and learning to identify the good in our day-to-day lives does not come naturally. It is a way that we as intellectual, self-aware beings have to counteract the way instinct protects us from getting eaten by bears or hit by a bus or killed by a serial killer or something, And it's a skill that takes a long time to learn. And like anything, you have to practice it, because if you get out of practice, you can backslide into being a nervous, distraught, hopeless wreck all the time. It's very easy to do that. Trust me. It's really easy to just backslide into being a defeated, nervous wreck all the time. So I think it's critical to make a point of doing things and focusing on things and consuming things outside of the news, whether that's you listening to like NPR or some political Twitch streamer, or I don't know, just reading shit on Twitter where people are arguing with each other, or watching shit on Rumble. You have to make a conscious effort to seek out other things as well. Find books that you like, find comedians you like and put their stuff on. Watch Norm Macdonald live. It's all on archive.org. The entire podcast is on archive.org. Watch an episode of that like a week as a reward for getting through the week. Make a point of it. Look forward to it. Make a point of enjoying when you go get like Burger King or something, instead of just eating it and then going into a food coma from the sludge you ate and then moving on with your day. Find those things, identify those things that make you happy. Your favorite kind of music, your favorite book, your favorite movie or show. Just throw it on in the background while you're working, burn a favorite candle. Make a point to reach out to friends and loved ones you've been intending to catch up with and you just haven't. That's one of the most critical things. Don't wait until you have time to call that like cousin or old friend right when you think of them. Send them a message or call them right then, because if you don't, it's going to be weeks and then months, and then you're going to feel guilty and weird about it, and then you're never going to talk to them again, when that you could have rekindled or maintained one of the most fulfilling and precious relationships to you, in your whole life. it's just a matter of making a conscious effort, being proactive about and committed to countering all of the negativity and all of the valid concerns about all of these horrible things going on with good things. You have to balance out the negative that we naturally absorb and emphasize. You have to balance that out with good stuff. You have to take an active role in cultivating your outlook on life, you know? And a big part of that for me was stepping away from a lot of this stuff because I was just immersed in it way too much to where it was exhausting and frustrating all the time. You will always find more stuff to be pissed off about. You will always find more stuff that will freak you out so bad that you'll lie awake at night thinking about it for a week straight. It's out there. It is out there, and you will find it if you keep scrolling, you know? And that's a big part of why I had to take a step back from the social media shit. It was a huge part of my identity, and it was kind of hard to let that go too, because arguing with people, being really vindictive toward people was like a huge part of my identity. Like, God, what a horrible thing to make part of my identity, you know? And it's like, that doesn't accomplish anything. You know, there are people and behaviors and groups and things that deserve to be condemned wholeheartedly. By no means do I think that you should be nice to everyone and accept everything. That's not what I'm saying at all. But the vast majority of the time, interactions where you just want to shit on somebody because they had a bad take on the internet, if just one person had reached out to that person and been kind to them and heard them out and then said, okay, I get where you're coming from. Let's talk about this a little more, because you can't possibly mean what you said. It sounds horrible. And you humanize yourself as a like a sentient sort of like avatar of the opposing school of thought, the opposing opinion. That'll make people who say horrible, vicious things back down too, you know? So many of our issues that we have interpersonally and culturally could be significantly lessened / remedied by being compassionate and treating people like people. And another thing that I've really struggled with is like a lot of instances where people are like, no, you did this to us and now we're going to do it to you and you're going to see what it feels like. As much as that is just, it doesn't fix anything. You know, when people devolve into acting like the cartoonish negative boogeyman stereotype that the other side has of them, you're just solidifying all of those people in their position, and people who were open to that ideology are now seeing that the shit these people are saying about you was all true, and you're pushing more people that way. You know, that doesn't just go for the left or the right. It goes both ways. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I kind of grew up. I got through some shitty situations I'd been in, and I kind of started holding myself accountable for getting out of situations I didn't want to be in anymore. That might have been a bit redundant. I don't know. But I was just like, how pathetic is it? How dumb and immature is it that being vindictive is part of my identity and something that I'm actually struggling to let go of? Like, what the hell is wrong with me? That's embarrassing. So, yeah, I just had to decide to prioritize my well-being over getting likes and retweets and shit like that on the internet, you know? The way I was using a lot of social media platforms was not healthy. It might work for other people. It might come from a more genuine, healthy place. for other people, people who are more well-rounded than I was and probably still am. But what I was getting out of and my motivation for arguing with people on Twitter was not healthy. I'd come about it in a way that was kind of incongruous with kind of very delayed, sort of growing into more psychological maturity. So yeah, that's kind of why I don't do that anymore. Does that make sense? I suppose it does. I hope it does. But yeah, I kind of realized that, yeah, I also sort of realized, now I'm kind of non-denominational Christian, so if anybody isn't religious or doesn't adhere to the same beliefs that I do, this is going to sound kooky. I understand that. I apologize in advance. But I came to the conclusion, and this is so funny because I was talking to a good friend about it, and she'd come to the same conclusion, that we had basically made politics our God. Guess who ran out of space on her phone entirely and had to go through and delete a bunch of apps to finish this video? That would be me. But that last point I wanted to make was that I had come to the realization that I had made my identity, my political identity, a more integral part of who I was than my identity as a follower and a child of God. And that was kind of a mind-blowing revelation. Like, politics and the belief that I needed to constantly be fighting with people about politics 24/7 because I was going to save the world that way, and that made me important and virtuous. That became the false idol I was worshiping. I was spending a hell of a lot more time fixating on that than I was on prayer, reading the Bible, doing like charitable works or whatever else you would consider to be godly or Christ-like. And it just, like, it blew my mind when I realized that. And that was possibly the main realization that enabled me to take a step back from feeling like, well, I'm being a bad person, I'm being selfish, I'm being cowardly, I'm looking the other way as all this horrible stuff is happening if I'm not fixating on it 24/7. I'm not doing everything I can to save the nation and save our God-given rights if I'm not fixating on this stuff and like fighting the good fight 24/7. And realizing that and prioritizing my relationship with God more. And again, I know that sounds like ridiculous and culty if you're not religious. I apologize for that, but it's been immensely healing. And it's also allowed me to have a more believable, sort of, a more authentic sense of peace about whatever happens. And that it is all in God's hands. That doesn't mean that you aren't responsible for your actions. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't speak up if you see evil being done in the world. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try and prevent bad things from happening, but everything will be okay in the end. And working on my relationship with God allowed me to get out of that belief that everything was horrible and the world was ending, that mindset that takes total advantage of anxiety and fear and paranoia and dread. It really allowed me to stop committing to that and start living in a place of gratitude and acceptance and peace, which I think is critical for my mental health and probably for most people's mental health, especially if you are worried about the stuff that's going on, if you are worried about, the ESG stuff and the horrifying things going on in Europe, regarding freedom of speech, which they don't have that right. I know that we constitutionally are the only ones who have that right, but regarding people's ability to say things and make jokes and just speak authentically, without first filtering it through, would my great and benevolent government approve of this before saying anything or criticizing anything or standing for anything. So, yeah, you'll notice I got fed up. I did like 12 chores and I'm back now and it's completely dark out. But I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say. I don't know how much content I'll be making in the future. I might start streaming again. I've thought about it. I've told people who have approached me and asked that I would like to start streaming again. I might start doing that weekly or bi-weekly. I don't know how soon that's going to be, and I can't commit to a schedule or anything at this time, but I just wanted to update you guys on what's been going on in my life and why I took a step back. And yeah, that's about it. So thank you guys so much for listening. I hope maybe some of this resonated with you. I feel like a lot of people have come to the same conclusions recently. It's definitely not just me. But I hope if any of this does resonate with you, that you're able to find a balance between staying informed and doing what you feel is your your moral duty as someone who's paying attention and cares about what happens to our God-given rights, whether or not they are respected and protected. I hope you can find a balance between that and also focusing on nurturing your relationships with your loved ones, focusing on enjoying the beauty and the wonderful things that you've been blessed with every day. And I hope you have an identity and meaning and purpose outside of this political fight, because there's so much more to you than this. And not everybody who votes a different way is evil. I know it feels that way, but you would be shocked how many people have no clue what's going on still. There are so many people, I promise a ton of people who have no clue that this stuff is happening. So there's always good that can be done. There's always progress that can be made. There's always somebody that you can reach if you come from a place of compassion and confidence in your convictions and knowing that they're based in fact. And yeah, I hope maybe me volunteering all of this information in the most excruciatingly verbose way possible might have been encouraging somewhat and might have made you feel a little less alone and struggling with some of this. So yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you again so much for watching. I'm sorry. I'm just so sorry about how long-winded I am. It's truly indefensible. So I'm gonna go do some laundry and watch TV, and yeah, and that's it. So I hope you all are well. Let me know what you've been up to in the comments if you feel so compelled. And yeah, whether or not I see you soon or in a little while, I really appreciate you guys. And please resolve to having a good day tomorrow, and having a good week, because I promise you, you are worth the effort to get there. Bye.